What's up, guys? Matt Walton here with Avodah Talk, and I wanted to kind of do a continuation of the video I posted a few days ago, or maybe a couple of weeks ago now, on scaling. And where I'm currently at right now within my business is just improving my HR department. And because I think when you only have maybe a person, two people, three people, you kind of have your employee handbook and have some things in place of how you handle certain things. But when you start to add more people to your team, it's critical that you get all of your procedures, all of your rules and to-dos and not to-dos in place so that your leadership and or supervisors can enforce those and they'll have something to stand on when they're enforcing them. So right now it's developing just an HR department. But the vision for the HR department is I'm working towards never firing anybody. And so I want to offer a discipleship program that if you do something that goes against company policy, you're kicked over to that discipleship program, if you will, where we pour Jesus into you, teach you how not to do these things, and then you're put back into the traditional marketplace, if you will, after you pass these tests and get approvals through certain channels to come back. So in order to get to that point, I have to create a solid HR department with procedures in place that I can build upon. So as y'all know, everything that I do is rooted in scripture. So when I think about Ephesians 4:11-12, I think about how God appointed the evangelists and prophets and teachers and pastors and shepherds and to go out there and to advance the gospel, to equip the saints, as it says in Ephesians 4:11-12. And so I look at that in the same lens when we are adding people to the team and delegating certain things out. They are equipping the rest of the team to be as successful as they possibly can. And that includes through discipline and performance improvement plans and all of that. So what I would say is going back, where I was at before is had a couple of guys, or actually had three people, kind of fluctuated between 3 and 5 people. I had an employee handbook in place and then it had rules, in place that were enforceable, that I was enforcing. I did not at that time have the best leadership in place in my shop. So I have a manufacturing business, and I did not have the proper leadership in place at that point. And so I was growing a leader. I was recreating myself through one of my top guys in the shop, but come to find out he wasn't the right person for the right seat. So you start to learn these things as you progress in business. What I'd learned is that it was hard for me to enforce things because the deal with my past supervisor in my factory was I would tell him, here's the things that we need to implement. Here's how you're to do your meetings in the morning times. I would have him shadow me to learn how I do meetings and all of that. And then it was hard to get him to enforce things because he was not only was a supervisor, but he was a worker. So he was one of the guys. And so whenever I would tell him, hey, this person showed up late or this person did X, Y, and Z, will you please address it? He would address it, but it wasn't something that was stayed on top of or enforced continuously. And so it just led to a lot of conversations that could have been avoided with having the right procedures in place. So in the meantime, man, I ended up and brought on a great leader, hired somebody that's doing my operations that will eventually fill the role of COO within my business and businesses. And as a result of that, we start to develop some procedures. And so the other day I had a near miss accident that happened to where one of my guys could have got seriously hurt if something would have happened, but praise God, God protected it from actually happening. And that sparked just an urgency on my part to get some of this HR stuff in place. So that way my leaders will have something to stand on when we're enforcing things. So my encouragement there is you have to develop your procedures. So I know this is different for all businesses. Again, I have manufacturing businesses, and I actually have 2 of them that are underneath one roof that do 2 different projects or products, and then I'll be expanding in a number of products within the manufacturing world. But I have accident procedures. And so what that looks like is I detail out the steps that go with the accident procedure. So if somebody gets hurt, they do X, Y, and Z, and they fill out this form, they do this, they call this number, and then that's our procedure for accidents. The same thing carries all the way down. So when we have illnesses, injuries, near misses, time off, I have procedures in place for every single one of them. I have forms for every single one of them that the guys are to fill out, that my supervisor enforces, have them fill out, so that we can make sure that they're protected and we're protected should something happen down the road. So develop your procedures, think through your business, and think through I do these 10 things. And so these are the 3 or 4 or 5 things that can come out of that. And so I need to make sure that my people are protected and they have resources to be able to handle whatever issue comes up. And then also need to make sure that our company is protected so that way we can continue to be a good steward of God's businesses. Out of that, we develop I know y'all have heard of like performance improvement plans, PIP, or behavioral modification plans. I actually define these as discipleship programs, and within that, we go through. There's these informal and formal processes. So before it ever gets to myself, or eventually that'll be done through somebody else. I'll hire somebody else to handle these instances and to do a number of other things. But give an example. If somebody comes in, they're late for work one day, and then the supervisor corrects them on that, and hey, man, we'd love to have you come in, so on and so forth, and just kind of leading them in the direction of showing up on time and telling them, what happens when they don't show up on time. Out of that, they may get snappy with the supervisor, so there may be 2 infractions that come out of that. And then the discipleship program is to literally enter into these counseling sessions to where before it gets into step 1 through 4 that stays on their record for 6 months or 12 months, they get counseled on how to overcome this and how not to allow this to happen again, and why they don't need to allow this to happen again. Then ultimately, if they make another infraction within 6 months, and that goes down to myself, which then I address that with the guys. I disciple them. I teach them why they do not need to do that, and then I encourage them and to keep rocking and rolling. So my version or my vision behind this is to get a process where I never fire anybody, to where somebody comes in, they do just that. They're late. They're disrespectful to a supervisor or whatever. They get into this discipleship program. Or I'll give you another example, because a little bit harsher of example. Somebody comes in, they fight somebody, they steal somebody's money. Instead of going in and saying, hey, you're gone because you did these things, they would then go and they would do some stuff through my nonprofit. Yes, they would still be getting paid, but then before they ever got approved to go back to work, they would be approved by a workplace chaplain, and also by my pastor, and also by my nonprofit. And then they would come back into work and start, either where they were at or start from the bottom up. It just depends on where we're at the time. So that's the whole thing. There is I don't want to. Man, Jesus is so awesome to not kick me to the curb anytime that I do something. His grace and his mercy is new every second of every day. And so my thing is, if we believe that we are to be disciples within the marketplace, or we are to disciple within the marketplace, then we need to be looking for ways of how we can keep people on rather than kick them to the curb, and how we can disciple them and love on them and be that heartbeat of Christ in the marketplace. And that's one way that we can do it. So just to explain, so informal and formal. So before it ever gets to me, if somebody was late and was disrespectful, before it ever gets to me, it goes through the informal process of discussing things with their supervisor. They get counseled, plus a number of other things. And then if they have another infraction within 6 months, then it comes down to me, and that's where we enter into the formal version of the formal part of the process. And then that's where the performance or the discipleship program really starts to be implemented. And then it stays on the record for 6 months. And then if they do something again, then it stays on the record for 12 months. And then ultimately there's a part in there to where then they would be kicked out to my nonprofit, and then go through everything that I just mentioned. So I want to encourage everybody, when you're going through and you're developing your HR department, utilize some resources. So one thing that I did was, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna have to go in and recreate and build all of this from the ground up and just from scratch. And we have a ton of resources. So utilize maybe your insurance, or who your insurance is through, payroll service. There's HR companies out there like NAE or ADP, and a number of other companies out there as well. Utilize them. Get all of their HR resources. See what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and adapt that to your business and just apply it. And then use that as your foundation to build upon. And then watch, man, what the Lord does there. The idea between a great HR department is to disciple and love on your people. And then ultimately, for me, it's not to fire, but to teach people how to overcome maybe their lifelong struggle with theft, or lifelong struggle with anger in the marketplace. So hopefully this blesses you guys. I want to encourage everybody that, regardless if you have 1 people or 10 people or 100 people, to relook at your HR department, and then just pray, God, what do you want me to do with this? What is the vision that you want me to have here? and show me what to do and how to do it, and just be obedient.